Hey, Nicole, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I am super excited to have you on the show today. How you feeling?
I feel good. It's beautiful here today.
I am looking behind you, and it is gorgeous. I can hear the little birds in the background. It's just spectacular. Do you come out in the mornings, get your coffee, listen to the birds, read your literature? Is that part of your routine?
That has occurred. Yes.
Yeah, because I'm looking at
Yes.
that right now, and I was like, and guess what? Because it's there in your backyard, you just get used to it, and sometimes we take it for granted, don't we?
That's true. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. I certainly do. Yep.
Well, it's gorgeous. I love it. All right. So, folks, today we have Nicole Lynn joining us on the SHAIR podcast. And Nicole sent me an email with a topic in mind that she would like to share with us. Here's what she writes. I have noticed a divided argument in the rooms regarding whether or not it's a good idea to form a romantic relationship with someone in recovery. The question, is it better to date and or marry inside or outside of the rooms? It comes up often. My partner and I are engaged. We have four children, ages 5 to 13. We both work full time. We run a home together. We vacation together. We raise our children together. But more importantly, we are both working active recovery programs. I would love to share my story and my experience as an active recovering addict in a lifelong committed relationship with another recovering addict. That sound about right, Nicole?
Yes.
We nailed
That's
it.
it. You
That's it.
nailed it.
All right. So let's dive right in. So, first of all, I already kind of touched on it a little because I'm looking behind you. Tell us a little bit about what your normal daily routine looks like, including recovery.
Okay. Um, so like you mentioned, I do have four kids. Stephen and I, we have four collectively. Um, they're all um, young in school, so we do have a school routine going on in the mornings. Um, but I usually get up before anybody else, and I have to be to work by 6:30. So I have a very early morning routine. If I'm on point and doing the deal, and I'm kind of in the groove, then I'm getting up about 5 and I have some readings, maybe sit quietly for about 5 minutes or so, um, just get a little, some groundedness. And then I get going and get ready for the workday. The kids get on the bus about the time I leave for work. So then I'm kind of off and running. I'm in project management in the industrial construction industry. um, and I'm usually there till about 5:30. Um, but at lunch breaks, I go to a meeting, usually AA, sometimes Al-Anon, um, sometimes NA. And, the weekends is just more meetings. I work with sponsees, meet with my sponsor. But I was, raised in AA. So a lot of my recovery is sort of modeled on the AA 12 steps and what was suggested to me in that program early on. But other than that, it's just family time, just doing the mom thing and trying to be present for my partner and my kids.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, you're busy. You're busy.
Yeah,
That's
we're
a lot.
busy.
That's a lot of kids, a lot of family time, a lot of meetings, a lot of recovery with the work in there. Do you find that it's daunting or overwhelming at some points, or have you managed to find your groove in everything that you do?
That's a great question. I have noticed that if I place self-care first
Mm-hmm.
on a basic level, like
Mm-hmm.
eating, sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
physical activity, of course, spiritual practice. I probably should have mentioned first recovery, anything that sort of feeds my soul. Um, Everything else works itself out. And I don't know how that happens, but it does.
I
If I
love
start to
this. Mhm.
manage, yeah, Um,
If you start to manage what?
if I start to manage and try to control and try to like arrange people and time and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. I get exhausted and I'm putting my energy in places that are kind of self-defeating. So this has been like a simple way to approach my busy life.
Hmm.
Self-care first and everything else just works itself out.
What I love about this right here is sometimes we get caught up in the words. We get caught up in the rhetoric. And when somebody says self-care, what does that look like? What does self-care look like? And I think for some people, self-care looks like massage, therapy, something big. You know, I say self-care and it just seems like this huge task. On a basic level, it's eating, don't get hangry, sleeping, make sure you get plenty of rest. And I know exactly what that looks like. Some sort of morning routine with possibly a spiritual practice or a journaling practice or 5-minute prayer or reading. It's basic. It's on a basic level. I eat, I get rest, I sleep, and I do something where I can connect spiritually. And none of that is difficult at all. It's super simple and basic. And that's why I asked it, because with 4 kids in a relationship and as many meetings as you go to, where does this come into the play? And it's like, well, I just keep it simple.
Got to keep it simple. And I have a good friend in recovery. If I call her stressed out, feeling spread thin, she's like, well, what did you do for self-care today? And the answer could be, I went to a meeting. Okay, great. You did self-care. Or I called another alcoholic. Awesome. Self-care, you know? So yeah, it's more in reach for me that way.
So let's set a precedent right now in Nicole's interview that when we think about self-care, the only thing we're thinking about is what simple, basic thing did you do or not do for yourself today that's leaded you to this moment right now where I'm feeling overwhelmed, anxious, frustrated. I didn't do something that I normally do for self-care. I didn't put my oxygen mask on first. And so what does that
Yes.
look like? And then as a matter of fact, you being on that call with that person asking that question is an example of self-care.
It's awesome. It's like I didn't have any money in early recovery. So, you know, I hear self-care and I thought, well, I can't go get a massage or,
Yes.
you know, it's too much. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to stay alive and
Mm-hmm.
learn how to eat 3 meals a day or whatever, or sleep 8 hours, or it was just too abstract for my,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my thinking at the time. But yeah, it makes it more accessible.
So let's dive into the spiritual practice in more detail. What does your spiritual practice look like? Your conscious contact with your higher power.
Hmm. Um, this is one of my favorite questions and one of my favorite topics that comes up in a meeting. I'm not like a super avid um, meditator, so I don't spend a lot of time in meditation, although I enjoy it and it feels natural to me, and I haven't felt that to be difficult. For me, it's a matter of not necessarily making the time for that. What I do a lot of though is prayer, and I guess my prayers it's throughout the day. And I was taught early on to just ask for help with everything, every task. And I needed that in early recovery. Like ask a higher power or whatever for help brushing your teeth in the morning or at night. You know, help me put the toothpaste on the toothbrush. Help me to walk to my bed. Help me to go to the coffee pot. And so it sort of created a really nice um, practice for me in recovery today, because I know that if I'm asking for help, then I'm in the present moment. It's like I'm asking for help in the moment. It also helps with, I think, some humility. It's like I can't do this on my own and I need some help with this. And yeah, it creates some conscious contact. So that's my practice today. And you know, anytime that I'm talking with another addict, um, there's definitely something that I feel there. There's a presence um, when two alcoholics meet, you know, or two addicts meet. Um, so I just, it's everywhere, you know, and I also enjoy going out in nature. I do find there's a lot of peace for me outside. So that's another way to access kind of a quiet, present place where I am able to hear that still small voice a little bit better. So yeah, as much conscious contact as I can. And again, keeping it simple, just asking for help with day-to-day menial tasks.
Beautiful. The thing too, as far as conscious contact, I get up in the morning and I have a routine. And when I'm good, then it's simple. I wake up, I have a little gratitude. Maybe I thank you, God, for all the wonderful things, amazing people in my life, for my recovery, things of that nature. A little bit of a jackpot, I introduce someone else. I've disconnected somehow. I'm trying to reconnect back to my higher power, but just can't. So there's this triangle. So AA, the triangle, a lot of what that represents is, and there's me, there's somebody else, and then at the top is God. So if I find that I've kind of disconnected and I'm pulling away towards, you know, the further away from the triangle, I reach out to somebody else, immediately it connects us to that higher power, to that source. As soon as I start talking to someone else, I feel better.
Yes, it's so true.
It's instant.
It's incredible. There is a power there.
Mm-hmm.
It does. It like kind of gets me back on the beam quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of
Yes.
like catapults me back into the groove. It's an incredible tool. I do like what you said about the routine. That's another thing that can help keep me in conscious contact, is practicing a routine. So yeah, all of that stuff has been helpful.
Yes. It's a practice. I also can't do it alone. So when I start to get squirrely, I just got to make a call, reach out to somebody that I know in recovery or someone that I trust. And then boom, immediately I feel differently. And what that I feel differently is I've just reconnected with my source, just reconnected with my higher power. It's as simple as that. So you make a ton of, you go AA, NA, Al-Anon, and you also do the SRC meetings.
Yeah, I've been doing I've only been making about one SRC meeting a week because of usually been hitting the bed pretty early. But those are great that's a great format too. I've enjoyed the online connection. It's been great.
So for someone who is predominantly AA, and I've done, I do actually, I do both AA. I go to regular AA meetings. I go to regular NA meetings, and not as regular as I used to because I do a lot more SRC meetings. But I know what it feels like to be in all of them. What I haven't done is any Al-Anon. So is there any sort of like, so what's the difference for you in particular? Like I go to all these different types of meetings. Do I leave feeling the same? It's just, I'm in a meeting, I get the spiritual nourishment that I need, I get the recovery nourishment that I need, and I go on and I feel better? Or is there anything in particular we say, well, this is what separates one from another?
Oh, wow. That's a cool question. So the online meetings like jack me up. I
Okay.
get like physically fired up with energy, and I don't know what that's about, but it's awesome. Um, it's interesting because the people aren't even in the room with me, but I'm
No.
super energized. I don't know what that's about, but I'm going with it. The different like types of fellowships, I definitely have different I have different responses in different meetings. AA meetings, I go, and after when I leave there, I felt like that warmth of being home. I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
it's like cozy, and I'm calm down, and just real mellow. It mellows me out. Um, and that also has a benefit, you know, in addition to being kind of fired up. Those kinds of meetings mellow me out. NA meetings, sometimes I can leave feeling icky, to be honest. It depends, I think, on the amount of sobriety in the room. Sometimes I'm in a place where I'm just absorbing everybody's energy, and sometimes that can be dangerous in maybe a meeting with not much sobriety, or maybe like a toxic meeting, which doesn't necessarily have to be NA, but just
Mm-hmm.
any time that there's, you know, some days I'm just absorbing negative energies a little bit more, and then I don't leave feeling very good. Al-Anon, I'm still somewhat new to that world. It tends to stir up more emotional stuff for me. It almost feels like a therapy session after I leave Al-Anon. So
Mm-hmm.
all of it has benefits,
Mm-hmm.
I think. I mean, I learned to put up boundaries in a meeting that's
Mm-hmm.
more toxic. Um, or, you know, I don't think any of them are by accident. I don't think I wander into any of them by accident. I always get what
Mm-hmm.
I need.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy exploring as many different fellowships as I can, because I don't have like a problem with drugs or alcohol or people or shopping. I have a spiritual problem. I have a spiritual issue or malady or whatever you want to call it. And the solution is the same in all of those fellowships for me. So it helps me address a lot of different aspects of who I am when I kind of hop around. So
I'm so glad we kind of drifted, because this is, and trust me, as you're talking, I just kind of, things just kind of pop up into my head, and I start to think about, wow, there's 4 different types of meetings that Nicole goes to, and I wonder what the experience is in each. And it's so interesting because what a lot of people find in the NA fellowship is very similar. What you mentioned in there depends on the level of sobriety. That's number 1.
yes.
Number 2, depends on the level of toxicity in the room. Number 2. Number 3, it's a lot of the dialogue. And what I have noticed, me personally, about being in NA meetings is there's a lot of nostalgia. They almost enjoy, and they wear this sort of nostalgic badge of honor when it comes to the old days. Like, I never forget that I'm a drug addict.
Yeah, I
I'm
get
always
that.
gonna be a dope fiend. I'm
I
always
get
gonna be,
that. Yeah.
I'm always gonna be a dope fiend. No, you're not. No, you're
No,
not. You're not a dope fiend
not
now.
today. Not
No.
today.
Right? A dope fiend is a dope fiend. You're a recovering addict. And so it's like, and I learned a lot about this in the MRC, in the Minnesota Recovery Connection, when I was getting certified as a recovery coach. It was like the language that we use is so important because it
Yes.
tells us where we're at right now. And a lot of the recovery
Yes.
in AA, they don't say gratefully recovering alcoholic. They say grateful recovered alcoholic. And I remember even thinking about that, going, that's kind of slippery. Recovered. Am I ever really recovered? Are you drinking right now? No. And so this is what's cool. And remember, my school of thought, and the reason why I launched the SRC, is for these conversations specifically. When we get caught up in the words
Yes.
instead of getting caught up in the message. And the message is, go ahead.
Yes.
I keep interrupting.
No, I'm just like hanging on your words, because I agree. And I'm thinking, I hope this isn't offensive, but like, words are very powerful. And in a meeting, when I hear someone identify themselves as a chronic relapser, I have that same reaction. And I don't know why I have a reaction in me. It's like, whoa, like, words are very powerful. Like
Mm-hmm.
today, are you relapsing? No.
Mm-hmm.
But if I continue to tell myself that I'm a dope fiend or a
Mm-hmm.
relapser or a drunk, a lot of people say, I'm just a drunk. Well, what are you doing today? I don't want to continue to tell myself something and create some weird self-fulfilling prophecy, or a deadly self-fulfilling prophecy for that matter. So yes, I get it, and words are very powerful.
Well, I remember, for example, one of my sponsors who passed away, um, and he used to say, "Hi, my name is Ed. I'm a grateful recovering addict. I'm a grateful recovering addict." And I remember thinking to myself, "Who's a grateful recovering addict?" When I first heard it,
Yeah,
why would I be
yeah,
grateful about this? But it's
yeah.
another thing to say, "Hi, my name's Steve. I'm a drunk." Or, "Hi, my name's Vanessa, and I'm a chronic relapser." This is an affirmation.
Right.
So
It is.
when it happens, it's no surprise because I'm a relapser.
You wonder, yeah. I mean, you wonder the
Right.
power of that.
Uh-huh.
Right. Totally.
I say it every day. I say it every day. I show up at a meeting.
Yes. And I mean, I know sometimes, I know when I came in, I didn't know who the hell I was. And so I really did want to attach to something, some kind of identity. I didn't know who I was. So I can understand, like, I'm an, I just feel more comfortable identifying. I'm not a drunk today. I'm not drinking. I'm an alcoholic. Or, I'm not a junkie. I'm an addict. There's a difference for me today. So yes, it's
And
just
yeah, and
important.
it's very important. And I remember like thinking back at the MRC too when I was there, and it was the idea of, "Hi, my name's Omar, and I am a person in long-term recovery."
Yeah, I like that.
It
That's
doesn't
love.
it doesn't
Yes.
it doesn't connect me to anything negative, and it doesn't connect me to a substance.
I love that. I've been noticing a lot of the kids around here that are coming over from treatment centers. They're identifying as, "Hi, I'm so and so, and I'm in recovery." That's
Yeah,
their
that's it.
new label.
Mhm.
That's what they say, and I love that. I think that's lovely. Yeah.
I used to say that all the time. Well, it just reminds me that, I did something, and this reminds me that I'm still an addict. And I'd say that in front of my daughter or my wife or my mom, and they would be like, "No, no, 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 you're not an addict, right?" And I go, "Hey, the minute I forget where I came from, there I am with that
Yeah.
whole nostalgia, wearing my drug addict jacket." And so I want, this is a beautiful word that she has used, identity.
Yeah.
So how I identify is how I see myself, how I see my own identity as. And so these words have incredible power. I move from, "Hi, I'm Omar. I'm a person in long-term recovery," or "I am a person in recovery," or "Hi, I'm in recovery." I could be recovering from anything.
Yes. There's
And
less divisions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's less divisions, and there's less of identification
Yeah.
to the substance and more of an identification
Yes.
to the process.
That reminds me of my partner. I'll be like, I am angry. And
Mhm.
he always laughs at me. He's like, you aren't, you are not angry. Anger is here. Like, that's true. I love it.
Well, you know what? You know what? That is, I until you said it right now. That's something that I will use moving forward. When somebody says,
Yeah.
"I'm sad, I'm
Right.
depressed, I'm
I am
angry," no, you're
depressed.
not.
No, depression is here.
Yeah, you're feeling sad. You're
Yes.
feeling angry. So let's talk about what the purpose of that anger is. Anger
Yes.
doesn't show up by accident. Anger shows up for a reason. It's there to protect me. It's there to warn me. It's there to say, "Hey, there's something wrong. I'm uncomfortable." So you're not angry. You're feeling angry. Oh man.
Yes.
I
The
just I
feelings are
just
there.
I
And
just got
again,
some
we
good
want
stuff here.
I want so much to identify, it's like, who am I without
Yeah.
these identifiers?
Hmm.
But because my ego is going, no, like I'm going to die if I don't have some kind of identifier. So it's nice to start to strip those things away and be mindful of the words. Yeah.
Oh my God. And what you just said there, I'm going to die.
The ego is freaking out.
Yeah. I need
Yeah.
identification.
Yes. Yes.
Who am I? Who
Yeah.
am I? Without that identity, without something to attach myself to, oh my God, I'm just going to die if I don't have
Yeah.
if I don't have a label to attach myself to.
Yes.
Wow, this was a nice little digression. All right, well, let's start getting into your story. First of all, how much clean time do you have? When's your anniversary date?
Okay. I have just over 3.5 years. My sobriety date is February 10th of 2015.
Awesome. I love it. And briefly, before we dive in, tell us how old you were the first time you drank or used drugs, and more importantly, how they made you feel.
Yeah. So, real quick, I was 14. I was over at a friend's house. Um, we got our hands on a bottle of bourbon. I had eight shots of bourbon and a beer and a half. I remember precisely how much I drank. And at the time, I was probably about 85 pounds. I'm real short. I'm tiny. Um,
85 pounds.
Probably about 85 pounds at the time, maybe 90. I was little. So now I'm just 5'2". So I was just like this little thing and I'm pounding these shots. Anyway, we were listening to Madonna's Immaculate Collection, dancing to Madonna. This was in the 90s, early 90s. And that night she had like a roof platform outside her bedroom window and we went out and I remember I puked all over her roof.
Nice.
And I shared this with you before. And I remember in the morning, her mom made me bring buckets of water out and kind of rinse the roof off. Other than that, cleanup, I had no other consequences and I was ready to do it again. So I didn't like getting sick, but I remember really enjoying the feeling before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoyed being out of my mind.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes. And I remember, the idea of no consequences, right? For some people, the embarrassment, the absolute embarrassment of vomiting all over your friend's rooftop and then mom coming up and going, "Hey, here's some buckets of water. Would you mind cleaning up your vomit off the roof?" Okay.
That's
And that's
funny.
like, and
Yeah.
there was really no consequences because I could give a shit.
No, I didn't care.
I didn't care.
I was it was just total disrespect. But all I
Totally.
kept thinking was, that was really fun. So, yeah. And as a parent today, I'm like, what in the hell was
Yeah.
I doing? Yeah. Anyway, my parents never found out. I don't think they ever found out about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might have been more of a consequence.
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yes. Yes.
All
I
right.
have no doubt, actually, is probable.
Yes. All right. So, Nicole, it's time for you to share your story. Battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and then finally your journey into recovery up until today. So, Nicole, take it away.
Okay. I'm going to really try to concentrate on not spending too much time in what it was like. So I'll just fire some stuff off, kind of paint a broad picture of what it was like. Growing up, I was a ballet and modern dancer. And there was some perfectionism that came along with that lifestyle. I'm not blaming the lifestyle for my perfectionism. I think it all kind of went hand in hand. I remember that I learned somewhere along the way to ignore my instincts. I don't know why that was. I remember kind of being told what to feel, or that what I was feeling or expressing was probably not correct. And so I just gradually learned how to kind of bury my instincts or distrust my instincts. Um, and that's important, I think, later on, as my addictions progressed. I started to blame my upbringing on my unhappiness. That was a big story for me in early recovery, was I was this way as a result of an upbringing, or
Mm-hmm.
it was their fault, or, like I was dealt a shitty deck or whatever. But as I've progressed through recovery, my story has changed. My memories, I think, have changed. I don't have, and the resentments, I think, have dissipated in recovery. I'm grateful for that. Um, so the perfectionism helped in school and in performing, but socially, I was like I didn't have many social skills, and I had trouble not being good at something, and that made me very uncomfortable to be sort of kind of like an outsider, like
Mm-hmm.
as a child in a social setting with friends and things. I remember I found a diary when I was in my 20s, a childhood diary, and I think I was 9 years old, and I was already talking about being fat, hating myself. I mean, I was 9. So I have children about that age now, and I look at them and I think, holy shit, like those are big topics for a child's mind,
Yes.
to be, you know. So I was writing about it, and so there was some self-loathing, I think,
Mm-hmm.
early. Um, I resented having to perform in life. So I was a performer on the stage a lot of my childhood, but I that never stopped. Like I would come off stage and I was still performing. And with ignoring my instincts, I basically lost all sense of myself. I didn't know who I was. I was like a shell, like a pretty shell made up with stage makeup, but it's just empty. Um, Sounds a little cliche, but that's what it felt like, I think, throughout my life. And so anyway, I started drinking at 14. That didn't last too long because it did always make me sick. So then I found drugs, and that was nice because I could sort of gauge my use.
Mm-hmm.
And being a control person and a
Mm-hmm.
perfectionist, it was easier to be like an amateur pharmacist, than to lose my physical capacity with alcohol. I did not like being out of control in my body. I was a dancer, so it was scary for me. I much preferred drugs. And so then I was in high school, and there was like these things that the kids passed around called a slam book. And this
Slam
is to
book.
get, yeah, and this is kind
Okay.
of give you an idea of, I guess, how I was um, seen by other children. What it was it's like on every page, at the top of the page is written a category heading, like prettiest, best hair,
Mm.
cutest boy,
Mm.
like categories. And then what the kids would do is they'd pass them around the school, and kids would add names. Well, there were negative categories too, like ugliest, worst dressed. Well, I ended up in the slam book under tag along and teacher's pet,
Mm.
which makes perfect sense because I never knew who I was. So I was always kind of tagging along. And the teacher's pet thing was that need to like perform, impress. I was always trying to impress. And so that was at the time really hurtful. But looking back, it's like, yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. Of course, that fits right in. Um, so I transferred high schools midway through, and I started dating a boy who was like captain of the baseball team, His father was a judge, was going to Yale next year. He was a senior. He was getting ready to pack up and move to Connecticut. He was like the catch of the school. And I remember feeling not good enough for his family. We had a somewhat decent dynamic. I remember it was a pretty good relationship, but around his family, I remember feeling like embarrassed about where I lived, who my family was, our backgrounds, the fact that my parents weren't together, just anything. And so that's interesting. I applied to Yale my senior year, because I wanted to follow him. And I remember the guidance counselor telling me, like, this is not a realistic goal for you. She was like, this is like basically way out of your league. And in my
What was the
mind,
goal?
to attend Yale.
Okay.
Yes.
This is not a
She was
realistic
like,
goal.
this is not realistic, Nicole. And taking that personally, and again, like feeding that story in my mind of, you're not good enough. That was not, she was exactly right. She was doing her job. She was really giving me a gift and kind of like, hello. But in that addict's mind, a teenage girl, I just felt, again, it was feeding the story. You're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're not perfect enough. You can't do this. But anyway, that was just something I thought of about my high school years that was interesting, fed my feelings of sort of low self-worth.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
But anyway, I did leave. I did leave at 17. I went up to upstate New York for college. I didn't know who I was, of course. I started dating men when I got there, and that's kind of when it was like off and running. I started doing pageants to pay for school. I started to get into the theater. I was still dancing, but I started to edge into the theater world a little bit. And cocaine use started, and that became my drug of choice. I started to have consequences at school. I was like caught cheating. At the university, was threatened to be expelled. I had to forfeit certain theater roles because basically I wasn't able to show up for practices and rehearsals and things. So the consequences kind of began. And I transferred twice to colleges, ended up in Rhode Island for a time, and then had like somewhat of a nervous breakdown the summer before my senior year of college and ran home to Dayton, Ohio, where I'm from. And I was still using cocaine at the time. My parents were still living there, and I crashed with my dad to finish my senior year of college. So I was stealing my dad's medications. I was stealing any mind altering substances I could get my hands on that belonged to my father. And, there's still, I have made amends to my dad, but they're still like, come on, like, I'm like, come on, that was low. But it just was part of my story. The other really crazy thing is my dad was a professor, and I remember taking one of his classes when I went home at this university. He taught at the university where I finished up. And while I was in his class, I turned around to the girl who sat behind me, and she was a girl I'd gone to high school with. And I remember asking her if she could get me Coke in my father's class. He's up there teaching, and I'm making a deal, with this girl for my new hookup in where I had ended up. And so that was, I was off and running. So that happened in my father's class. The amount of disrespect, and I had no idea that I was doing anything wrong. I was just really fixated on, how do I establish a new hookup here? I spent some time in Europe, and it was a few months, and I spent a lot of that time high. I went up to random people on the streets in Soho in London, 1 o'clock in the morning. I could have been killed.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Portugal, a dangerous man was following me. All kinds of weird, precarious situations in the name of scoring.
Mm-hmm.
Like at a club, lean over to a stranger. Hey, do you have anything? What the
Mm-hmm.
hell?
Yep.
God's grace. It's grace. It was grace that saved my ass, because there were a lot of times where I probably shouldn't have walked away. Anyways, I did manage to graduate, and I started into regional professional theater. So now I was like supposedly starting to put some big girl pants on and be an adult and work. I got into, numerous back-to-back relationships. Any town I was in, I would get involved with someone. I started getting fined in my theater companies because they would bust me with substances. The cleaning, we would stay in these actors' houses, and the cleaning people once found something, and the producer sat me down and was like, "We found something in your room," and I was like, "That's not mine," and I would just denied it, and just the level of dishonesty, and I never came clean. But again, they knew. Anyway, I kind of started to get blacklisted, and I ended up getting pregnant and having a miscarriage. And after that, I sort of had another nervous breakdown, and that was in 2009. I had given up a great role. I threw away an opportunity for a great role in Cats, which is a great dance show, and just ran away from my career and drove cross country home to my mother, who at this time lived in North Carolina. So that was in 2009. I still didn't know who I was. I was still using drugs. I still didn't know how to fill my soul. And so I was using relationships to do that. I didn't know what I was going to do for a living, so I didn't have a real active theater or dance community here. And so my aunt said, "Well, why don't you just start a dance studio?" It was like, "Oh yeah, I guess I could be that." Like no idea who I was. It's like, I could be that. I could, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And that's kind of the way I live my life. It's like, maybe you should do this. Yeah, maybe that's who I am. So I did that. I started a business, and then the years following, I had numerous relationships. I got pregnant, filed bankruptcy, closed the business, got pregnant again. So I'm now a single mother of two different fathers, alone, using, drinking, public assistance, no diapers, no trash bags, no toilet paper in the house, no food. And I look out the window, and DSS is pulling into the driveway. I remember the car and the moment. And it was like this perfect symphony of destruction. It was like I was in the middle of this perfect storm of everything around me had crumbled. It was dark. The kids were suffering. I was suffering. And that was basically my bottom that day. So I ended up, for no good reason, still don't know how, other than maybe a moment of grace. I Googled AA meetings in the area. And I don't know why I did that. I didn't know anybody in AA. I'd seen some movies, with AA in it. And I was like, these weird woo-woo people. I don't even know, other than I was led that day to do this. I'm an addict. You know, that, I guess that is my identifier. If I'm going to identify, I identify as an addict. But we didn't have a strong NA presence. So I ended up wandering, you know, into an AA meeting. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with these weirdos?
Mm-hmm.
These people are acting like they're in a cult. They act brainwashed. They're way too happy to not be on anything. There's got to be some weird witchy or religious voodoo going on. This is their.
The
I was
Stepford Wives.
incredibly uncomfortable. Yes, it was exactly. I was like, these women were coming up to me, putting their arms around me. Yes, it was. It was very disturbed. I was very disturbed. Disturbance was there. I was not disturbed. Disturbance was present. So it was, I didn't want to hold hand. It was just, I had the willies, but there was something about it that kept saying, come back, you know, keep coming back, keep coming back. And so I did. And I ended up abstinent, you know, I stopped using. And on my 30 days or right around there, my daughter and I were playing. She was 4 at the time, my oldest. And we're rolling around and she's climbing on me, and she just like stops all of a sudden and looks down at me and she says, "You're back."
Mm.
And then she went right back to playing again. And it was like not her, you know, it was that moment where God spoke through this child. And I remember her eyes and how everything paused in that moment when she said that. So that was powerful. And I held on to that in the first 90 days. I wish I could say that I got sober for my kids. I did not. But I wish it was just too powerful. But that moment with my daughter helped me stay sober in those early days. So that kind of held me accountable. So I'm very grateful to her, to all the kids. But anyway, I started noticing God everywhere. You know, it's like that magical time when these coincidences are all over the place, and it was lovely. And I was like, well, can't explain that. Oh my God, there's another one. And that was cool. It was like being on acid. I mean, everything was bright. Everything was colorful. It was like everything was in sync. There was a rhythm. There was music. Everything was just flowing. And I had never noticed that before. And I was sober. And I could see this rhythm, synchronicity, harmony, whatever you want to call it. It was something I couldn't explain. That was important for me because that was where my concept of a higher power began. I could not explain that. I couldn't. So anyways, I did have some struggles in the beginning. I had some beginning symptoms of some health issues that made it difficult in the early days. I had 2 kids, you know, I was single at the time, so I'm trying to sort of tote them to meetings. I was trying to figure out childcare while working full time. There were all these like challenges, life stuff was happening. But it was like, regardless of these challenges, I was kind of like floating around like a kid on Christmas. It was every day I'd get up and I'd think, okay, what do you got for me? Like, what adventures await? What gift will I open next? It really was like being high. It was what I had searched for my entire life. And it was this like eagerness to be present. And it was like I was a little toddler, unwrapping life one gift at a time. And I remember starting to learn who I am through my senses. So it was like, oh, I like to eat this food. It tastes good. Oh, I don't like this food. Or, oh, the scent is really nice. Oh, I don't like how that smells. This fabric is soft. This fabric is rough. I had no concept of that early on because I had ignored my instincts and my reactions to things, kind of pushed them down. So it started on a sensory level, learning what I liked, learning what I wanted, what felt good, what didn't. I got to start all over again. I got a clean slate. So AA laid a foundation, a framework for who I am, and then I began, with God's grace, to go out every day and unwrap a little different piece of me. And my life, of course, started to improve. So I've had some financial windfalls in recovery that were like unexplainable financial gifts. I had gradually like better housing, better job. I started to work the steps and more gifts appeared, not just physical gifts. What was the greatest improvement was that I was starting to feel okay in my skin. Like I could sit and it was okay to be alone. I shouldn't say that though, because it was less uncomfortable. But the reason I shouldn't say that is because I still had trouble being alone. And that leads me to the last bit of this, is my relationships in AA. And this kind of comes back around to the topic. And that is, even though I was sober and I was working a program in the steps and my life was improving and my kids were healing and I was healing, I still had this like void in me. I had a spiritual relationship. I had a connection with something greater than myself, but I was still seeking out companionship from human beings to fill something in me that was still empty. And these men, I would hop, like in my first year, I had about 9 men I was seeing here, one to the other, to the other, to the other. These were not healthy people. I was not healthy. So obviously I wasn't attracting healthy people. 2 of them committed suicide. One of them
Wow.
died in a tragic motorcycle accident. They were not, and they were in recovery. A lot of
Wow.
these people that passed away, unfortunately. But yeah, like these men, this is where I was, I was in abusive relationships in early recovery, which it was not that long ago, thinking back to the amount of sobriety I have. Emotionally abusive, spiritually abusive. I saw a man in early recovery who was a devout Christian and into like Armageddon philosophies, storing grain,
Oh.
guns, and
Oh.
this gloom and doom. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought, like, for me, it was like working for me at the time. I think back now, I'm like, what? Like, that was dark. But for me, where I was health wise, that was working for me. So anyway, of course, with each relationship, there would be an end and I would sink deeper. Like the pain would get even worse. And it was like my heart would rip out, like I like convinced myself these people, I was in love with these people and I can't handle this pain and I'm going to wither and die without these people. And it just would be so painful because I was sober, I was feeling it. And I was convinced that this is like intimacy, right? Like I was like, isn't this is like real shit happening? And the last relationship I had, toxic relationship in recovery, it ended badly. He was a pastor, and the spiritual life on the outside for me was alive and well, but inside I was filling up, trying to fill with human beings and time. And I was taking hostages, basically. So anyway, the last time I remember driving down the road, and he had broken it off. He had some issues and wanted to begin some therapy on his own. And I thought I was going to die. And I remember for some reason, I was driving down the road and it hit me like a bolt of lightning, a spiritual awakening. In that moment, I knew that people would not fill me. And I talked about this before. It's like it was so simple, but the experience of it was monumental. It was like the only way that I can feel complete and whole is if I fill myself with the Spirit.
Yes.
That is the only thing that will make me whole. I am of no, how do I say this? I cannot be a responsible, present, giving, loving partner until I am complete. And I'm not going to get complete by making a bunch of money or screwing around with a bunch of men or having another kid or whatever, you know, taking a project, working more hours. It's all about what's happening inside. It's the spiritual solution. And it's what they talk about in meetings, every meeting, but it didn't sink in until that moment. I had to go through enough pain and to get beaten enough, beat myself enough. And that was it. That was the gift. Since then, I spent a little bit of time alone, which was lovely. And I just like grew in companionship with my higher power during that time. And it was a number of months after that my current partner appeared in my life. And it has been an incredible experience. Different, very different. Untrodden territory for me. It was like, God was like, I was like, I can't do this. I give up. It's only you. I'm sorry, you know. And then suddenly he was like, thank you for getting out of the way. Okay, let's work on this a little. And now here you go. And suddenly Stephen appeared. I had been trying to force my life for so long. I got to get a dad for the kids. I got to get a partner. I got to get a caretaker, somebody to make the money, somebody to take care of the house, somebody to love my children. And I was forcing it. And it wasn't until I got out of the flippin' way that God could work in my life. So it's been great. I mean, that piece was the final, not the final piece to grow, but that was my final block, my biggest, how do I say that? Like my biggest obstacle in early recovery was removed. And ever since then, it has been fairly stable and continuous, gentle growth. And it's just been lovely. It's been lovely.
You know, I love so much about your journey because so much of it is about learning. You're someone that likes to learn. And in many cases, until the lesson's learned, I'm going to keep repeating the same mistakes. The insanity of it all. The insanity of it all. So, curiously enough, when we talk about Stephen, and you guys have been together for how long now?
About 2 years now.
Okay, so for 2 years. So now let's go back, and how does he compare to and recognizing that, yes, I understand the level of dysfunction in the other relationships, but as far as just at first sight, first sight, how does Stephen match up at first sight to all the other guys?
Okay. That's funny. Um, well, when we first met, neither of us were interested in getting involved.
Mm-hmm.
He was very deep in a spiritual practice, and I was
Mm-hmm.
very deep in my spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we were both kind of on our spiritual journeys.
Mm-hmm.
So at first sight, it was almost like curiosity, I think. Um, Whereas before with other men, it was like, oh, this is happening, or
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
how can I manipulate this to make it
Mm-hmm.
happen? Whereas Stephen, it was almost like a childlike curiosity, like, well, I'm focusing on this incredible spiritual recovery life, but this is kind of interesting. And it felt more gradual,
Mm-hmm.
deliberate. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of, once we began to know each other, there was a lot of like instantaneous, that was the thing, is the way we clicked, the synergy. It's one of those things that's really difficult to describe because there was this, again, this rhythm. It just
Mm-hmm.
felt really natural.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, there was a lot of like passion and drama and uh, dysfunction and fighting. And, it's like this Italian melodrama opera that I was into before. And with him, it was like this incredible, gentle, and continues to be this gentle, like canoe ride down a stream. It's just lovely. And the foundation was spiritual. We were attracted to each other's spiritual lives. So again, that just goes, I first had to grow whole in my spiritual life. And then I began to attract someone that was whole in their spiritual life. That had to happen um, first. So yeah, there really was no comparison at all. Um,
And
start.
right. So if I think back to that moment where I said I'm going to let go. Okay. So I said I can't do this. I'm obviously way off. My picker's all wrong.
Yes, busted.
I need you to take over, God, right? I need you to take over. But then you did some work. So, and the work that you're talking about is you started diving into your spiritual practice.
Yes.
Okay. And what does that look like?
So it was on my knees morning and night,
Uh-huh.
at least
Okay.
morning and night. And it started out with awkward conversation, like I'm supposed to be praying to you, but I don't really know if I don't really know if this is right. I don't know if I'm doing this right. And then it was like there was some humor, and then there was a friendship that developed, and then there was a relationship that was a little more intimate as I'm talking and listening with God. So I needed the physical act of getting on my knees, physically bending down toward the ground. And so that picked up during that time.
Mm-hmm.
I also had to stop all contact with any males. I had
Okay.
to stop. And
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that that was to make more room for my higher power in my life.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of, I'm sure, why that occurred. But I mean, I had a therapist that sat there while I deleted every male contact in my phone. She said,
Mm.
Are you willing to do this? And I said, yes, let's do it. And we did. Um, so there was a lot of that, but I did meditate quite a bit. Um, I enjoy meditating, and that is one of those things that I'm always trying to aspire to incorporate more into my life. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just lovely. And so there was a lot of that. I started doing yoga again. I started moving, and I started taking baths and practicing self-care. In the water, there was a lot of times in the water where I would have conversations with God. And so that became sort of incorporated into my practice. Um, the meditative power of yoga and movement for me, and I think probably for a lot of people, was immense. As a dancer, I enjoy being present in my movement. And so that was a big part of my practice. So yeah. And then of course, my kids, like being present with the kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was it. It like helped me let go of control. I was always practicing step one with the kids. It's like, please God, like help me to remember to let go of this. This is yours. Just help me to do your will. Just help me to let go. And that helps with my parenting. So that's kind of what it looked like in the times when I was alone before we met.
So when you started your practice, how long did it take before you actually met Stephen and not have a relationship? You just met him.
Yeah. So we met, like, I was in the last relationship in that crazy time of recovery and met him about a year prior. And we noticed each other. And but then we went on our merry way. And a year later, so it was like after 3 months of being alone, or 2 or 3 months, that's it, of being alone, we saw each other again at a meeting. And we're just drawn to each other. And then, a few more meetings later, and we talked after the meeting one day. And neither of us were interested in dating. But he mentioned that he had 2 little girls. And I said, oh, I have 2 little girls. And that's kind of what started the conversation.
Okay.
And yeah. So 3 months, 2 or 3 months of being alone.
So I know that for many of us, uncertainty is probably the most uncomfortable feeling, other than, just jonesing and withdrawing off the dope. So there is this thing about uncertainty that we just hate. Yeah. I want to know what's coming. I want to know what's happening. I want to know when I'm going to feel better. I want to know. And allowing the natural process to happen is, we just fight it. So when we do, it's 9 relationships within a year, one right after the other, chasing the relationship for the dopamine fix that the drugs used to. I'm still in addiction. Mm-hmm. However, if we do allow ourselves that moment, we hit that moment of quiet desperation where it's like, God, I've hit another bottom. I can't do this anymore. I need you to help me. I need help. And then you take the action, which is, I turn it over and I seek help and I seek guidance. I get on my knees and I pray. I go to a therapist who helps me delete the phone numbers. I go to meetings and share about it. I ask for help, number 1. And then number 2, I take the action of distancing myself from the pursuit of relationship. And it was 2-3 months later, I notice somebody. We noticed each other. And it's interesting because you've mentioned gentle a few times. And you say it with an emphasis on being gentle. And if we think about what you were doing in those months, is that you were being loving, gentle, and kind with yourself. And so the intentions that you poured into yourself eventually brought someone into your universe that was the same. Like attracts like. Dysfunction seeks dysfunction. Gentle seeks gentle. So as I am gentle and kind with myself, this gentle and kind man shows up in my life.
That's lovely. That is my story.
That is your story. That is what happened. Because before, the thing about you and the thing about recovery that's probably been the easiest thing for you is you're a learner. You like to do the work. You're a performer.
Yeah.
I like to
Gobble it up.
excel. Yeah. I'm a
Yeah.
dancer. I will learn how to dance. I don't mind going to school. I don't mind putting in the work. I don't mind going to recovery and doing the steps and getting involved because it works. It fills me.
It
The
works.
work
It
is what fills
does.
me. And
You're right.
so if we look at this whole idea of I am not enough, prior to the using, something happened. I don't know what that is. We would have to do a whole lot of different work, and there's no time in this interview for that. However, here's what happens when I find drugs. When I find drugs, something happens and I change. And all of a sudden I can walk up to a perfect stranger and go, "Are you holding?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know you,
Right.
but you got any drugs? So what is that? Because a lot of people would say that's insanity. That's craziness. How could you do that? It's so dangerous. You know what that is? It's courage. It's confidence. It's independence. It's strong. It's all of those things. I couldn't do any of that. I couldn't approach a perfect stranger if I wasn't confident that I was going to get what I wanted. And the courage, I am walking into a fearful situation, regardless of the consequences, going after what I want. That's courage. It's not the absence of fear. It's the presence of fear and going through it anyway. So what does that give me? Copping dope gives me self-worth.
Yeah.
It says I am enough. I could do this.
Yeah. I got this.
I got this. I got this.
Yeah.
There is this, if we strip away all the negativity around it, because it's negative and it'll fucking kill you.
Yeah.
If we strip away the negativity and we take a look at why we succeed when we get sober, because when we tap back into the courage, confidence, independence, and strength, we develop an identity. And we become a grateful person in recovery.
Grateful recovery is here.
Yes, right? And guess what? We develop a new identity. And if you notice, a lot of the people that have a problem with recovery, it's because I don't want to be one of those people. How many times have you heard that? But I just don't want to be one of those people. I don't want to have to claim that I'm an alcoholic. I don't want to have to say that I'm an addict. I want to be one of those people. I don't want to be those people that goes in the basement of a church smoking cigarettes and hiding out. And it's this, what are they wrapping their head around? An identity.
Yeah.
I could wrap myself around the identity of being a dope fiend somehow. There's something very cool about being a drunk and a dope fiend. But a recovering alcoholic, oh my God. Wow. That's pathetic.
Yeah.
That's pathetic. So what is the identity? What's the identity you want to wrap yourself around? You choose. You choose your own identity. But you have these character traits that you needed to cop dope. You had to have them. You couldn't be some scared, isolating freak that couldn't leave the house. You only did that after you got the drugs. But when I needed them, I was out there, man, like a beast.
Resourceful.
There's another one. Let's add that to the list. I'm resourceful. You know what else I am? I'm resilient.
Yeah, tenacious. All these
tenacious.
Things. Has to keep the addiction going. It's
you
nice
could knock me down, but I'll get back up.
Getting up again. Getting up again. Oh gosh. Yeah. It got tiring. Yeah.
What you became for yourself eventually is what you attracted into your life as a partner.
Yes.
There's the message. The message is become the person you want to be with?
My sponsor told me at the beginning of this journey, she said, I want you to list the 5 qualities that you want in a partner. Go ahead, write them down on a piece of paper. Now, I want you to spend the next year or however long in recovery attaining those qualities in yourself.
There it is. There's the answer,
Yeah.
guys. There it is.
Yeah.
Become the person you want to be with.
Yeah.
And it's as simple.
And then after a short time, you're doing it for you.
Mm-hmm.
I
It
like
feels
to
good.
say, yeah, it's like I forgot that I was doing it to find the perfect partner because it started to feel good. It was like, oh, this is great. I think I'm going to do for myself a little bit more. Maybe I'll do it again today, and it's the paradox.
Oh,
Just another
it's
paradox.
yup. Right. I was looking for that perfect person, or finding my soulmate, and you know who I found? I found me.
Yep. That's the gift of recovery.
That's the gift of recovery. You find yourself.
Definitely.
And once you find yourself, then that person is just going to come naturally into your life. God's not going to send the right person when you're a hot mess.
No, we'll miss it. I mean, I was
going to
out
blow
of
it. Yeah, this, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. My wife and I joke about that all the time. She goes, because she's heard me tell my story a few times. She goes, I can't even believe that's the same person. I wouldn't have gotten a cup of coffee with you.
No, I said to Stephen the same thing. I'm like, if you had walked past me on the street, you just would have kept going. You would have kept on walking. So yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Yep. We transform. We transform.
We are transformers. All right.
That's funny. That's funny.
Nicole, that was magnificent. We're going to end on that topic right there. And we're going to go into the closing questions because that was perfect. That's exactly the message. To find the person that's right for you, you have to become the person you want to be with.
It's great.
That's the message. That's the message. So that's what we were extrapolating from this interview. So I love it. I love it. I'm going to put that somewhere in the title. That's got to be somewhere. That could be the tagline. Become the person you want to be with. I love it. Relationship recovery.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's cool.
Okay. I like it. Yeah. We did it together. All right. All right. So Nicole, for the newcomers, 5 questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, number 1, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
That's great. So I've mentioned this before. When I first came in, I thought there was a door number 1 and a door number 2. So door number 1 was I continue to use and I'm miserable. And door number 2 is I stop using and I'm miserable. And I did not know there was a door number 3, which is I could not use and be happy. I only was able to find that through a recovery program. I don't have to white knuckle it, but that kept me out. I thought, well, shit, if I'm going to be miserable, I might as well be using. I didn't know that there was a third option for living. And that is exactly what the program has given me, is the ability to not use and be happy. Be happy sober, be happy clean, be okay in my skin. And I don't have to be messed up in the head to feel that way. I didn't even know that was possible. I had no idea.
And what's behind door number 3, Johnny?
Right? Exactly. It's like, wait a minute, what? There's another?
Well, right behind this door.
Yeah. A lot of years in the dark on that one.
There's a door number 3?
No way. Oh, what a cool discovery, though. That was cool to find out.
All right. So number 2, at what point did you have a spiritual awakening, that aha moment in recovery where you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol, but for the first time had developed the hope that you could recover?
Oh yeah. So the power of drugs and alcohol over me, the power of like obsessive, toxic thinking, my mind, the pain of the thoughts. When I was able to realize the healing effects of prayer, for example, please, higher power, remove these obsessive thoughts. Please, higher power, remove these obsessive thoughts. Please, higher power, remove these obsessive thoughts. And then suddenly the thoughts are gone. Feeling and experiencing that working, it's like, holy shit, that worked. That's when I begin to have hope. It's like I actually experience the power of prayer in resetting my thinking, starting my day over, calming myself down, or asking for help for God to calm me down. That's what gave me hope. I needed evidence before I could like grow my faith. I needed to feel and see something working, and that was the first time I did.
So I love this too. It's a beautiful mantra because it could apply to anything. Please, higher power, remove these obsessive thoughts.
Yeah.
What are those obsessive thoughts? We all have obsessive thoughts.
Right. Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever.
Anything.
We all have obsessive thoughts. Please, higher
Yeah.
power, remove these obsessive thoughts. And it's no different than my sponsor when I first got sober. We're talking within the first 90 days. And he's like, every morning on your knees, please, God, please help me stay clean one more day. At night, oh, thank you, God, for another day clean. That's it. That's your prayer. It's under 10 seconds. You're done. If you want to expand, that's fine. This is a requirement. And I remember going, all right, whatever. And then it happened.
And you were sober that day.
Yes. Yeah. And 6 months later, I realized that the urge had been completely removed. Completely. And I couldn't remember, it was months and months of, it wasn't every day, but I mean, I would have some days where the urge to use was so overwhelming. And the only thing I had was a little picture of my daughter that I had in my wallet because she was a baby. She was only a year old, less than a year old at the time. So I'd keep this little picture of her in my wallet, and then I'd get on my knees and I go, God, please help me. Don't let me use today. That kind of a thing. No, it still fucks me up. I'm starting.
Yeah, I know. I
get all teary when I think
powerful.
It is.
It is.
Because I remember that feeling of desperation. It was desperation, asking, begging, please, God, do not let me use today. And then 6 months later, when that's gone, and I'm like, dude, there's no way to explain this. I just did what he told me to do, and it worked. Holy moly.
It's got to be a miracle. How else?
It is a miracle.
Explain something like that. 24/7, 365, using, can't go without it for 5 minutes, and then suddenly I don't have a desire to use. Like, what? Obviously, there's something bigger.
Obviously.
That's lovely.
A lot of God bumps on this episode, Nicole. All right.
Oh, I love God bumps. Those are good.
Me too.
Good stuff.
It is good stuff. Okay, number 3. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to our newcomers?
Yeah. Okay. So newcomers. So, all I read was the 12 and 12 and the big book in the very beginning. I also read Living Sober. But then I read a cool book. I read a lot of Melody Beattie stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Brene Brown.
Oh, love Brene Brown.
I know. She's great. I also got A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps, which was just another step study kind of format by a woman named, I think she's Dr. Covington. And then Breathing Underwater, which
Mm.
was Richard Rohr. And he actually has a lot of great stuff, but he writes a really cool book that parallels the book of the Bible and the big book, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to advertise Christianity. It's just a very interesting look at the parallel. So yeah, but little snippets of stuff, paragraph at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
not much in the beginning. Just
But these,
did what I could.
yeah, but these are authors and motivational speakers that get recommended all the time. Breathing
Mm-hmm.
underwater has been recommended on multiple occasions. Obviously, the
Great stuff.
literature for AA or NA has been mentioned, and
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown gets mentioned all the time. It's It's
Yeah.
such a simple way at looking at the human condition and how fragile it is based on how we look at ourselves. Because at the end of the day, this guilt and shame that we carry around with us is not necessary.
No.
It is not
No.
necessary. Shame there's no room for shame ever. And guilt, it's just there to remind us that we need to make an amends. That's all. It's a reminder. It's a placeholder. Oh, got to make an amends. And that's all it is. And when we don't make that amends,
Nice.
that's when it slips into shame. And it could be an
Guilt
amends to
comes first.
myself. It could become an amends to myself, and it could be amends to someone else. It could be an ongoing amends, whatever the case may be. But guilt is just a little placeholder. It reminds you, oh, got to make a
Oh.
change.
Mm-hmm.
Got to make a change.
Oh.
I don't make that change. What's wrong with me? Oh, I should have done that. Oh, I could. Oh,
Yeah.
forget it. It's too late now.
I'm
Oh,
a piece of crap. I'm the worst
yeah,
in the world.
yeah. And
I'm the best of the worst.
yeah.
I'm the worst of the worst. I'm really
And
good at being the worst. Reverse pride. That's what happens. Yeah.
I love to prove shit to myself. I love the brain loves to be correct. It loves to prove. It loves to, aha, see? I told you were a piece of shit. And now, affirmation, right? Good or bad, I just want to be able to prove that I'm right.
That's it.
Ego. So, I mean, all that negative shit to say that you do something wrong, that's where the 10th step is vital on a daily basis.
Love it.
I immediately recognize where I need to make amends and immediately take action. I go and make amends where necessary. And if I'm not sure, talk to your sponsor or a mentor or somebody that you're close to and say, hey, listen, man, this came up. How should I look at this and what should be my next step? And then things just start to shift. You start moving from self-centered to God-centered real fast. All things
Gotta
Brene
take
Brown.
an inventory. She's great.
She is amazing. All right. So number 4, what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Yeah. So early on, it was probably when I was told to ask for help with everything. I don't think she was talking about so much like asking people for stuff. I think this was from my original sponsor. She was talking about day to day, moment by moment, menial tasks, asking a higher power for help. It was her way of encouraging me to get a dialogue going, to form a relationship, to talk to higher power. It has changed since then, but I'm so glad I took that suggestion because that created quiet time, space, and presence of mind in early recovery that I needed.
I love it. I love it. And so number 5, if you could give our newcomers only one suggestion, what would that be?
Probably to pray for trust. like, even though I didn't know what the hell was going on in the beginning, I didn't understand what they were talking about. I didn't understand the steps. I didn't understand what was happening in me. I felt crazy. Anytime I'm scared because I don't know what's happening or I don't understand and I get fearful, I have to pray for trust. Help me to trust you that you know what is going on, that the universe will take care of me, that all is well, that this too shall pass, that this is all for the greater good. Whatever, however I need to say it, but it's all about help me to trust you that you got this, that I'm okay. Pray for trust. If I've got fear, I'm probably not trusting in the process. I'm projecting, or there's shame. And I need help with that. I need to ask for trust. Help me to trust you more. Help remind me that all is well. And that's always been helpful for me. Yeah, especially early.
I love it. I love it. Which reminds me of another book, The Universe Has Your Back, Gabby Bernstein.
Oh, cool. I like that title. Yeah.
It's a magnificent, she's in recovery. So it's just sprinkled with all kinds of recovery jargon in there. And it is a magnificent book. My wife and I did, she's got the audio version on her phone. So I remember one of our beach trips, we just listened to the whole book on the way there and on the way back. And it's spectacular. And it's talking about just that. It's just allow me to trust. Help me to trust. And whatever and however, that manifests in my life.
Manifest, sure.
Beautiful. Nicole, this was a magnificent interview. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it very much. Thanks for that, Omar.
Guys, I'm just going to let you in a little secret. This was a re-record that we did. And I knew there was a reason why. My internet just was horrible, and my mic cut out halfway through the interview. So the audio was all distorted. We had to redo, and this was magnificent. It was perfect. It was exactly what God intended.
I'm grateful. Aww.
All right. So, folks, we've now reached the end of our show. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
And that's a wrap.